Have you ever gone quietly insane? So quietly that at first you doubt not the world, but yourself? When the line between truth and imagination blurs, and you start checking yourself more often than you check reality? I have. My name is Valerie, I'm 32. And it all started with the death of my cousin. I never thought of myself as paranoid. I didn't run to doctors for no reason. Didn't read symptoms at night. Didn't take my blood pressure for fun. I just took care of myself, tried to sleep, eat normally, not push myself to the point of breaking. But when my cousin died at 29, calm stopped working. It happened fast. A week earlier, she'd been laughing in voice notes and making summer plans. And then, one call, a hospital, the words, "We didn't make it." In our family, everyone kept repeating the same thing. Young, healthy, how is that possible? And the more often the word healthy was said, the less it meant. After the funeral, a thought moved in and refused to leave. If it happened to her, it can happen to me too. Not tomorrow, not today, but anytime. The first few weeks, I held myself together. I worked, I smiled, I answered messages. But at night, I lay there listening to my heart, counting beats. In silence, it was worse. My husband saw it and got tired. He didn't argue out loud. He just acted like he didn't notice me pressing my fingers to my neck again. Sometimes he turned his back to me in bed, as if another wall had appeared between us. And that was when Cyril came back into our apartment. Cyril is my husband's best friend. They've been close as long as I've known my husband. Cyril was always around. Birthdays, trips, the small domestic pieces of our life. Usually, he knew how to keep his distance and not push into someone else's home. After the funeral, he became more attentive. Or maybe I started reading every look as a sign. I'm not sure anymore. He came over one evening when my husband was in the kitchen and I was in the bedroom pretending to read. I could hear them through the door, not the words, the tone. Cyril spoke quietly, as if he was afraid of startling my anxiety. Then the door opened a crack, and a small box was set down on my dresser. I don't like gifts without a reason. They almost always come with a hidden obligation. Be happy, be grateful, justify someone else's care. But the box was plain, no ribbon. A smart ring. Cyril said it was just a thing for sleep and stress. Not treatment, not a diagnosis, just numbers so I'd feel calmer. I'd heard of these devices, but I never thought I'd become the kind of person who clings to data like a life raft. Relief rose in me, almost shameful. As if I'd been given permission to be afraid, but in a neat, tech-shaped way. Not, I'm losing my mind, but I have metrics. Not, I'm scared, but I'm stressed. My husband was skeptical. He didn't start a fight, but his face said it all. Another gadget, another spiral. Cyril looked calm, confident, like he'd made the right move. I put the ring on that same night. At first, it was almost funny. The app drew tidy graphs, sleep, heart rate, recovery. It felt like I was finally controlling the chaos. On the second day, I got my first alert. High stress detected. I even smirked. Of course I'm stressed. Then the alerts started coming more often. Sometimes at moments when I actually was nervous, running late, forgetting something. And I began to believe it. It could see right through me. And then something happened that made it impossible for me to look at my screen the same way again. I was sitting in the kitchen, peeling an apple. No rush, the apartment was quiet. My husband was in the shower, a rare, almost precious feeling of an ordinary day. And in that moment, my phone vibrated. High stress detected. I looked at my hands. They weren't shaking. I took a breath, steady. My heartbeat felt calm. I looked at the screen again, as if I could make the notification disappear by staring at it. For the first time, I wasn't afraid for my health. I was afraid of the thought that if the ring wasn't wrong, then it knew something about me that I didn't know. I turned off the screen, but the vibration seemed to stay in my skin, and I caught myself with a strange urge to check whether someone in the next room was watching me. After the funeral, I stopped living by a calendar and started living by my body, and it seemed normal to me. I didn't think of myself as paranoid. I thought I was attentive. The difference, as I saw it then, was huge. Paranoia is when you invent illnesses. Attention is when you don't ignore symptoms. And after my cousin's death, ignoring anything felt impossible. In that system, the ring didn't look like a toy. It looked like a compromise. It didn't argue with me or soothe me with empty words. It just showed numbers. And for the first few days, that felt almost like relief. I'd wake up and open the app the way people open the weather forecast. Sometimes it was almost kind. Good sleep, normal recovery. I'd catch a brief flash of joy, like I'd been handed a note saying I was allowed not to be afraid today. But then the alerts started coming more often. First, poor sleep. Then high stress detected. Then low recovery. Nothing terrifying on its own. Normal life. Work, traffic, news, coffee, fatigue. The problem was that the alerts started matching my days so precisely it felt like the ring knew my fear before I did. I could still argue with poor sleep. Sure, I woke up at night. Sure, I tossed around. I could argue with stress. Of course I'm stressed after a funeral. And then an alert arrived that knocked the air out of me. Heart attack risk. I saw the words and didn't even understand at first what hit me so hard. Not the meaning. I understood the meaning. What hit me was how ordinary it looked. Like a weather update. Rain possible today. I sat on the edge of the bed and checked myself the way I'd learned to. Inhale, exhale, palm on my chest. My heart was beating. Fast, but beating. My body felt warm, my mind felt cold. I didn't call an ambulance. I didn't collapse into hysteria. I just went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I tried to stay rational. Maybe the algorithm is wrong. Maybe I slept badly. Maybe I overheated under the blanket. I needed data. I needed observation. So I did what felt right. I cut coffee to 0, drank more water, went to bed earlier. I became more careful. With work, with emotions, with any strain. It felt like I was finally doing what I should have been doing all along. My husband watched it like a performance. He didn't call me crazy. He said something worse, that I was winding myself up, that I was looking for a problem where there wasn't one, that I was turning our home into a hospital. But I wasn't turning our home into a hospital, I was trying to make it safe. I tried to explain one simple thing, to myself and to him. After my cousin's death, I no longer have the right not to notice. If I'm wrong and ignore a signal, I'll never forgive myself. And he couldn't live by that logic. For him, a signal is when someone is sick right now. Fever, pain, blood, not a line on a screen. He trusted what you can touch with your hands. My fear was about what you can't touch. So we started arguing more. Not loudly, not with screaming, more the way tired people fight. Short sentences, pauses, the silence afterward. I was angry because I felt alone. He was angry because he felt powerless. Cyril would drop by sometimes, just because. He'd bring my husband coffee and bring me fruit. He was tactful and steady, like there was no irritation in him, no fatigue. And against the background of our tension, that steadiness looked almost suspicious, but I didn't take that thought seriously. I thought about something else. If the ring shows risk, then risk exists. One night I woke up sharply again, like something inside me had shoved me awake. I took a breath. and caught that one empty second where the brain asks, what if it's now? My phone vibrated immediately. High stress detected. Then another alert. Poor sleep. I stared at the screen and felt a strange calm. Not relief, calm. Because if all of this is true, then at least I make sense. And if my husband doesn't believe it, then he just doesn't understand. I turned off the screen and lay back down like I'd closed not a phone, but a conversation. And still, in the dark, right before I slipped into sleep, another thought came for the first time, and I pushed it away immediately. Why do these alerts arrive so perfectly on time, as if someone is pressing a button? If you live next to fear long enough, you stop looking for comfort. You start looking for proof. After that heart attack risk alert, I tried to behave reasonably. I didn't turn every line into a verdict. I told myself, it's an algorithm, it's a warning, it's just a metric. I convinced myself, this is how it's supposed to work. The ring doesn't treat you, it highlights things. But the more it highlighted, the more I understood, I can't argue with numbers forever. So I did what I thought was the adult, correct thing to do. I checked the source. First, I reread the instructions. Then I scrolled through the FAQ. Then I found the section about alarming notifications and realized everything there was written too neatly. Maybe related to stress, maybe related to sleep, maybe related to recovery. Everything may, not a single definite statement. I didn't need "don't worry." I needed "the device can be wrong." So I wrote to tech support. Not in a panic and not with accusations. I composed the message so they'd take me seriously. Times, dates, the types of alerts, how often they appeared. I attached screenshots. I chose a tone without emotion because I knew if fear showed in the text, they'd read it as exaggeration. While I waited, I tried to live normally. I went to work, pretended to laugh, answered calls, but inside me, a timer was running. When they respond, I'll finally know where the error is, inside the ring or inside me. The reply came the next day. Polite. Even. Your device is functioning correctly. Our diagnostics found no faults. I reread that sentence 10 times. If they'd written, "We found a glitch," I would have exhaled. If they'd written, "False positives happen sometimes," I would have exhaled. But they wrote that everything was fine. In that moment, I felt a strange resentment, not toward tech support, toward reality. Like I'd been denied the right to blame my fear on technology. I showed the email to my husband. He read it quickly, the way people read documents they don't want, and shrugged. For him, it was the ending. The device is fine, so the problem isn't the device. For me, it wasn't an ending. For me, it was the start of another thought. If the device is fine, then it isn't winding me up. It's recording. It's warning. It's seeing what I'm supposed to see. And that same evening, I noticed my husband was looking at me differently. Not like a wife who's unwell. Like someone who can't be convinced. We talked less. More precisely, I talked less. I was afraid that if I said one more sentence about sleep, pulse, and stress, he'd pull away for good. And if he pulled away, I'd be even more afraid. Instead of conversations, I had checks. I opened the app in secret, in the bathroom, in the elevator, in the grocery store. I looked at recovery like it was a grade for my ability to live. And each time I felt the same sting. If today's numbers are worse, that means I did something wrong again. So I started searching for what, exactly? Salt? Emotions? A conversation at work? Taking the stairs too fast? I cycled through causes just to avoid thinking about the worst one. Cyril was around those days as if it were natural. He'd drop in for 10 minutes, ask how I'd slept, then switch the topic to something neutral. He didn't argue with me, and he didn't tell me to relax. He just accepted my anxiety as a fact. And it worked. Too well. Because with him, I didn't have to prove I wasn't making it up. One day I opened the app and noticed a line I'd never paid attention to before. Small, gray, almost invisible. Sync completed. Nothing suspicious. A normal technical phrase. But suddenly I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd manually started a sync. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the screen, trying to replay my actions step by step. And the more honestly I tried to remember, the less certain I became. Because I remembered something else. How on the first night, Cyril helped set everything up quickly because I was exhausted. How he held my phone a little longer than necessary. How confidently he tapped buttons like it wasn't his first time. I told myself it was stupid, that I was tired. But tomorrow I'll have to do something I don't want to do. Ask my husband to show me which devices are connected to our account. Because if tech support is right, then there are no faults. Which means the cause is somewhere else. When someone tells you it's all in your head, they rarely mean to hurt you. Most of the time, they just want the conversation to end. They don't understand that for you, it isn't a conversation. It's air. The day after the tech support email, I waited for the right moment to show my husband one simple thing. Not my fear, not drama, not my exhaustion. A fact. If the device is functioning properly, then the alerts aren't glitching, which means we should at least take them into account. I didn't get the chance to turn it into a calm talk. It blew up over something trivial. I said that I'd gotten another risk alert today and that I wanted to check our account settings. Just check which devices are connected. I said it as evenly as possible, like I was reading out a grocery list. And that calmness, I think, is what set him off. I won't repeat his words verbatim. I don't remember the exact phrasing. I remember the feeling, like someone sharply pointed out where support ends in our apartment and irritation begins. He was tired. Tired of my phone on the table, tired of my eyes snapping to the screen, tired of the way I freeze when a notification arrives, tired of mornings that start not with coffee but with graphs. Tired of me talking about recovery like it's the weather, like it decides whether I'm allowed to live. He said I was obsessed with myself. He said it's hard for him to come home because home isn't home anymore. It's an anxiety clinic. That he's sick of my paranoia, that it's all in my head, that I've lost it and don't see how I'm draining him. And at some point I caught myself thinking, he isn't talking about the ring. He's talking about me. About who I became after my cousin died. About how he doesn't recognize the woman he used to live with. Just live with, laugh, make plans, fight over normal little things and make up quickly. Now every little thing is a signal to me, and every signal feels like an accusation to him. I tried to explain the most important part. I don't want to live in fear either. It's hard for me too. I don't want to wake up at night and wonder if I'll make it to morning. But the more I tried to explain, the more he shut down. He wasn't arguing with my logic. He was arguing with my right to be afraid. And that hurt more than any notification. Because when someone beside you acknowledges your fear, it becomes a little less frightening. But when someone beside you says you made it up, you're left with only two options. Either you really did make it up, or you're alone. I chose a third option, the most dangerous one. I went quiet. Not because I agreed, because I understood. In that moment, Every word I said would become evidence against me. Any attempt to explain would turn into, "See, you're doing it again." Any request for support would become, "It's always about you." He went into the other room and closed the door so hard it felt like it wasn't a door closing. It was my chance to be heard. That evening, Cyril showed up again. I don't know why it was that evening. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe my husband texted him. Maybe Cyril senses things the way people do when they've been friends forever. Cyril brought a bag with ordinary stuff, fruit, something for tea. He was steady, calm, like he had a reserve of patience my husband had run out of. I told myself I was just grateful that at least someone wasn't looking at me like a problem. And I caught myself again. That kind of grateful is dangerous. Because in moments like that, it's easy to mistake support for rescue, and rescue for dependence. That night, I opened the app again, not out of curiosity, out of habit. A habit that, in a frighteningly short time, had become stronger than me. The line was there again, the one I'd noticed before. Sync completed. I closed the screen almost immediately, not because I was scared, because I was tired of arguing with myself. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to decide what was worse, keep talking and keep hearing that I'd lost it, or go silent and be left alone with numbers. And in that silence, it became clear for the first time, the ring wasn't the cause of our fights. The ring was proof that we were no longer on the same side. And when there is no we left in a home, every signal sounds louder.
Do you know what's most destructive about someone else's anxiety? Not the anxiety itself, it's that somehow you're always the one to blame. My name is Max. I'm 35. And if I sound like a bad husband right now, I'll accept it. Because I did become a bad husband, not because I stopped loving her, but because I got tired. Valerie changed after her cousin died. I saw how hard it hit her. I saw how she held it together at the funeral, and then, at home, how she started listening to silence like it was hiding an answer. At first, I did what I know how to do. I acted. When Valerie first said she felt something off, and that her heart felt weird, I didn't argue. I put her in the car and drove her to the hospital. Everything there was predictable and, at the same time, reassuring. Waiting line, cold light, tests, measurements, questions. And then, the words I wanted to hear, everything looks normal. I exhaled. I thought that would be the end. But it didn't end. Because normal test results didn't calm Valerie down. They made her angry. Later, when she got scared again, I suggested we go back. And that's where something began that I didn't know how to carry. She refused. Sometimes sharply, sometimes right on the edge of breaking. She could raise her voice and say we'd go again, waste time again, and they'd find nothing again because they don't understand that it was pointless, that she was tired of proving how she felt to doctors and to me. And I didn't know what to do with that. Because if someone feels bad, the logical thing is to go where people help. But if they refuse to go where people help, what am I supposed to do? Just believe it. On faith, believe something you can't see. I tried, honestly. But as her fear grew, so did the thing that destroys relationships fastest, checking. Valerie checked herself. Pulse, breathing, sensations. Then the app, the charts, the alerts, those short pauses after every signal. It felt like she stopped living and started monitoring herself. When Cyril gave her that smart ring, I knew right away, this would be bad. Not because I'm against technology. I'm against the way Valerie clings to anything that gives her the feeling of control. The ring didn't become a gadget for her. It became a judge. I watched her build her day around the graphs: when to sleep, what to drink, how much to walk. I watched her quit coffee, quit laughing at little things, quit being here. Her attention was always somewhere near a screen. And the worst part, it pulled me in too. Because if she slept badly, I had to be quieter. If she was stressed, I had to speak softer. If there was risk, I had to cancel plans. I was becoming someone who lived according to someone else's notifications. And then, I started feeling angry. Not at her grief. At the fact that my life got paused too. And no one asked if I agreed to live like this. At the fact that everything I said became a test. If I support her, that means I admit she's right. If I doubt, I'm the villain. And that's where I broke. Because I don't know how to live in constant anticipation of disaster. When she brought up checking the devices connected to our account again, something snapped inside me. Not logic. Exhaustion. I told her it was all in her head. I said it harshly. I said it the way you're not supposed to. I told her I was sick of her paranoia, that she'd lost it, that she was obsessed with herself and couldn't see how she was destroying us. I said it, and I saw her face. Not hurt, not anger. Emptiness. I went into the other room and closed the door. I sat in the dark thinking the worst thought of all, that maybe Valerie really is scared. And that I, the person who was supposed to be beside her, chose not to be. Cyril dropped by that evening, like he always did. He was calm, too calm. And I caught myself realizing that next to him, I could finally exhale. Because with him, you can just be silent. And that silence was the most dangerous comfort of my life. There are things you don't hide from other people. You hide them from yourself. Because once you name them, you have to explain them. After I snapped at Valerie, I wanted to believe we were just tired and that we'd breathe again soon, that she'd calm down and I'd get gentler, that it was temporary. But inside me, there was something else, something much uglier than anger. Fear. Not fear for her heart, fear for my image of myself. Because Valerie was right about one thing, I didn't believe her. And she could feel it. She felt it as clearly as she read her charts. And the more she felt it, the more tension grew. And tension always drags up what you hoped you'd forgotten. I wasn't planning to talk about Cyril in this part of my life. Cyril was my friend, my since childhood person. The way people say it when they want to mean forever. He was always there and there was nothing wrong with that. If anything, I was proud of our friendship. The problem is, friendship is a word that can conveniently cover everything else. That evening started normally. Cyril had just been through another breakup. Not loud, not theatrical, just another "it didn't work out." I remember his face. Tired, empty, like someone who no longer believes anything lasting is meant for him. I wanted to support him. It sounds cliché, but it's the truth. We drank. At first, just a little, the way adults do when they're just unwinding. Then more, because the conversation got more honest, and honesty usually needs fuel. Cyril talked about how tired he was of being the extra person. I told him he wasn't extra. I said it too confidently, like I could prove it. After that, my memory comes in pieces. The kitchen, a glass in my hand, laughter that suddenly goes quiet, a pause that lasts too long, and the feeling that the line between us disappeared not at the moment of touch, but earlier, at the moment we both decided not to step back. I'm not going to describe it. Even now I hate typing the word "it." I'll only say this. I woke up the next morning with the feeling that something had happened that should never have happened. and Cyril was there. The first thing I felt was shame, the kind that burns from the inside. The second was panic. The third was the urge to turn what happened into a mistake, an accident, alcohol, anything except a fact. Cyril was quiet. He didn't push. He didn't demand anything. He didn't even try to talk about it right away. And that was the most dangerous part. Because silence is space for meaning. So I did what I'm best at. I built a wall around it. I told myself I was married, that I loved Valerie, that I had a normal life, that it wasn't me, just weakness, that I shouldn't think about it. And I really did stop thinking about it. Almost. I kept seeing Cyril like nothing had happened. He stayed my best friend. We met up, called, talked about sports, work, plans, everything as usual. Except sometimes I'd catch his look, and something inside me would clench. Because it wasn't a friendly look. It was too attentive, too warm. Like he remembered what I was trying to erase. I never told Valerie about that night. Not when her cousin died and she got scared. Not when she started pulling away. Not when the arguments began at home. I stayed silent. Because if I said it out loud, I'd have to answer the question, what does it mean? And I didn't want to look for an answer. And now that our home is full of alerts, checking, distrust, I suddenly understand how dangerous my silence is. Because Valerie can sense a lie. Not the fact. The lie. She doesn't know what happened back then, but she feels I'm hiding something. And she starts looking for explanations in the one place where something can still be measured. Maybe that's why her ring irritates me so much. Because it makes visible what I've spent years keeping invisible, anxiety. And when I think about that, one thing becomes clear. In our story, there are two kinds of signals. Some show up on a screen, others come from the past. And I don't know which ones are more dangerous. After that night, I lived as if you could split your life into two folders. In one, Valerie and our marriage. In the other, Cyril and what can't be said out loud. I acted like the folders never touched. But life doesn't respect borders like that. The fights over the ring stopped being just fights. They became a test. Would I choose Valerie out loud, not only in my head, and every time I chose rational? Valerie didn't hear rational. She heard rejection. I tried to be honest in the ways I knew how. I said, let's go to the hospital again. Let's check your heart, let's do tests. Let's hear one more time that everything is fine. It felt to me like I was pulling us back into reality. But Valerie refused. She didn't just say, I don't want to. She said it like the suggestion to go to doctors was betrayal. Like I didn't believe her again. Like I was trying to prove again that nothing was wrong with her. Sometimes she snapped, raised her voice, said they'd find nothing again because you can't catch this with tests. That she was tired of being the girl they tell to calm down. That she wasn't going to humiliate herself anymore. And I still didn't understand. Because in my head it was simple. If you're scared, check. If you checked and everything's normal, breathe. But for her it worked the other way around. Normal results didn't bring relief. They left a void. It meant the fear would stay nameless. I watched her become thinner and harder at the same time. I watched her stop eating properly. I watched her keep her phone close, like it was the only witness to her truth. And I watched how every skeptical look from me made her even more stubborn. I'm not proud of it, but I started avoiding her. Not physically. I was there, I slept at home, I asked, how are you? But inside I slipped into energy-saving mode. Fewer conversations, fewer conflicts, fewer feelings. I was trying to wait it out. And during that same period, Cyril started showing up more often. It looked natural. He's my friend. We hadn't seen each other in a while. He dropped by for a minute. He'd come in the evening, bring coffee, sit in silence. He didn't speak badly about Valerie. He didn't add fuel to the fire. He just stayed close in a way I didn't know how to manage then. When Valerie shut herself in the bedroom, Cyril stayed in the kitchen with me. And I caught myself breathing easier, not because I was happy. Because next to him I didn't have to choose my words. But along with that relief came a feeling I refused to name. Guilt. I knew I was doing something wrong simply because it felt easier with another person than with my own wife. And at the same time, fear. Because if I admitted that guilt, I'd have to ask myself what I actually felt for Cyril. So I dodged the answer. I tried to do everything right, keep my distance, text less, meet less. I even caught myself choosing routes so I wouldn't accidentally run into him in the city. It sounds ridiculous, but it was true. Cyril noticed. He didn't say anything directly. But the small things shifted. His messages got shorter, his pauses got longer, his look got heavier. And then, one evening, Valerie said she wanted to check which devices were connected to our account. Not loudly, not hysterically. Too calmly. And in that calm I heard a threat. Not a threat to the ring. To all of us. Because if she starts digging, she won't only find technical details. She'll find my fear. And for the first time I thought, maybe my biggest mistake wasn't that night. Maybe my biggest mistake was that after it I kept living like I could control the truth. When I went to bed, I heard Valerie in the next room typing something on her phone. For a long time, too long. I lay there staring at the ceiling, and one thought kept pounding in my head. Tomorrow she'll ask a question. The only question is, who she'll ask? Me or Cyril?
My name is Cyril. I'm 34, and if you saw me from the outside, you'd never think I'm the kind of person who gets attached. I look, as people like to say, like I turned out well, tall, well-groomed, with a smile that works, even when I'm not actually amused. Women often look at me like I'm an easy romance, a pleasant story. And maybe that's exactly why nothing real ever worked out for me for years. Because easy stories don't end in a home. They end with a 2-sentence message you read in an elevator while pretending you're fine. I got used to being chosen quickly, and, just as quickly, unchosen. At first I acted like I didn't care. Then I explained it away as work, personality, the wrong people. And then came the moment when I understood. The problem isn't that no one loves me. The problem is that no one holds on to me. So I value things that hold. Max is one of those things. We've been friends a long time. The kind of friendship where you don't have to negotiate closeness because it's like air. You just know the person will be there. He was always steady, even, reliable. When he married Valerie, I didn't feel jealous. At least, that's what I told myself. I liked Valerie. She was alive, smart, with the direct gaze of someone who doesn't like manipulation. They fit, and I was happy for Max. And then death entered their normal life. I saw Valerie after the funeral and understood what fear looks like when it doesn't pass. It doesn't scream, it just settles inside a person. And then any small thing can trigger panic. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, I don't know how to cure grief. But I do know how to do what feels useful to me, bring a solution. That's when the ring idea came to me. It seemed logical, no pills, no diagnoses. Just data, sleep, stress, recovery. I knew one thing, Valerie needed confirmation. Not because she's weak, because she's scared. And when someone is scared, they grab onto what can be measured. I gave her the ring and helped set it up. Quick, no extra talk. I saw relief flicker on Valerie's face, just for a second. Max reacted predictably. He's a skeptic. He likes things simple. If it hurts, treat it. If it doesn't, live. And that's why I thought the ring would help both of them. Because if Valerie had numbers, it would be easier for her. And if Max had numbers, it would be easier for him to believe. I watched them from the side and saw the tension grow. Valerie became more and more focused on signals. Max got more and more irritated. They talked like two people using different languages. I stopped by just because. Brought coffee, fruit, some small thing. I didn't push into their conversations. I wanted to be a buffer. And at some point I realized I was succeeding. When I came over, the apartment got quieter. Max relaxed. Valerie did too, for a while. And I caught myself feeling something I didn't want to admit. I like being needed. I like that my presence changes something. It isn't vanity, it's hunger. Hunger for a place in someone's life. The problem is, you're not given a place. It's either offered or taken. And when I saw Max shut the door on Valerie, not physically but with words, I didn't feel gloating. More like a quiet, dangerous certainty. If he's that tired, then their normal is already cracking. And cracks always demand a solution. I wanted Max to be able to exhale. I wanted him to have a place where he didn't have to justify himself. And I understood how pretty that sounded, too pretty. Because the truth is usually simpler. The truth is, I was tired of being the one people choose quickly. And I didn't want it to happen to me again. That evening, when Max said Valerie had lost it, I was sitting with him in the kitchen. He was silent, staring at the table, and there was more in that silence than in any words. I told myself, I'm just here, I'm just supporting him. But deeper down, I felt something else. Like someone inside me quietly noted, now I'm needed. And if I'm needed, then I have to hold on to that place. Just hold on. And from there, everything becomes dangerous, right where a person stops understanding where help ends and habit begins.
I'll speak carefully. This isn't diagnosis and it isn't labels, but an attempt to break the character's behavior down into motives and defenses. What matters more in this story isn't who's right, but how each of the three is trying to survive inside their own version of reality. Valerie. After the sudden death of someone close, the brain stops trusting ordinary safety. The world becomes a place where something bad can happen without warning. At that point, anxiety rarely looks like hysteria. More often, it looks like discipline. Valerie chooses control, not because she enjoys controlling things, but because control is the only way she can feel the ground again. For her, check means don't miss it. Track means do everything possible. Know the metrics means be responsible. Important. Valerie doesn't see herself as paranoid. She sees herself as attentive. And psychologically that makes sense. Paranoid is a word that invalidates. Attentive is a word that protects dignity. As long as her anxiety is framed as healthcare, she can live with herself. Why the hospital doesn't calm her. When tests show everything is normal, A rational person feels relief. An anxious person can react the opposite way, because normal results don't explain the sensations. They don't close the fear, they leave it without a name. If the threat wasn't found, it means it can't be caught, and then the only thing left is to observe even more closely. At that point, Valerie isn't arguing with doctors anymore. She's arguing with helplessness. The ring becomes the perfect object for anxiety. It promises visible control and objectivity. Numbers feel more honest than people. A notification doesn't get irritated, doesn't get tired, doesn't accuse. It just arrives. Max. Max isn't cold, and he isn't cruel. He's functional. His coping style is action. Problem, right pointing arrow, solution. If you're scared, right pointing arrow, check. If the check is normal, right pointing arrow, breathe. He really did take Valerie to the hospital. That's his love in action. But when checking didn't solve the problem, Max fell into a trap. He doesn't understand how to help, where help produces no result. Then what people often confuse with indifference switches on: exhaustion. He's drained not by Valerie's fear itself, but by the constant demand to be a perfect support. He feels like any word he says becomes an exam. If he agrees with the anxiety, it's like he confirms danger. If he doesn't agree, he doesn't believe her. It's a no-win position. So Max starts protecting himself with irritation. Here, irritation isn't a personality trait, it's armor. He says it's all in your head, not because he wants to humiliate her, but because he wants to shut the topic down so he can survive too. That armor just happens to hurt the most. The conflict is a system. In this couple, a loop starts. Valerie feels danger, right pointing arrow, looks for confirmation, right pointing arrow gets a signal, right pointing arrow, anxiety intensifies. Max sees anxiety, right pointing arrow offers a rational exit, right pointing arrow gets refusal, right pointing arrow feels powerless. Powerlessness turns into anger, right pointing arrow, anger sounds like invalidation, right pointing arrow, Valerie is left alone with fear. Loneliness intensifies the need for control, right pointing arrow, the loop repeats. Cyril. Cyril is the third element in the system. And in stories like this, the third person rarely appears by accident. Socially, Cyril looks easy, attractive, confident, liked by women. But psychologically, people like that often have a vulnerability. They get chosen quickly, but not held. People want emotions with them, but don't want responsibility. That hurts, not romantically, but cumulatively. At some point, a person starts valuing not passion, but stability, not wow, but near. And then there's Max. Stable, reliable, predictable, a human anchor. Cyril doesn't verbalize his feelings. He masks them as care, as friendship, as I'm just helping. That can be sincere, but that mask is exactly where the danger grows. When a person can't tell where help ends, and where the attempt to take a place begins. Subtle hints, no spoilers. The third person is always easier than a partner in crisis. He doesn't get tired, doesn't demand, doesn't get offended. He shows up more often, precisely at peak tension, as if by accident. He offers solutions that increase the heroine's dependence on an external source of control. He becomes the only place where one of the spouses can exhale. In part 9, I described the dynamics. Now I'm doing something else. Building a case. like a psychologist detective who doesn't talk in general, but lays it out as facts, right pointing arrow hypotheses, right pointing arrow elimination, right pointing arrow motive, right pointing arrow consequences. I'm considering 3 versions. Version A, Valerie is working herself up. Version B, the device is glitching. Version C, there is a person in the system who is interfering. And here's why the 3rd version is what remains. What doesn't fit, she did it to herself. Yes, Valerie has grief, trauma, anxiety, and a need for control, but self-spiraling usually looks different. The fears jump around chaotically, today the heart, tomorrow the stomach, then dizziness. Anxiety peaks are tied to clear triggers, work stress, conflict, sleep loss. The most important marker, anxiety increases with uncertainty, but at least sometimes drops after reassurance. Everything's fine, the doctor said so. In your story, what drops isn't anxiety, it's trust. That's the key. Valerie doesn't get relief even where she should get it, at least briefly, after the hospital, after normal results, after a rational explanation. Instead, a new layer appears. Then the danger is invisible. That's no longer just anxiety, it's a structure that needs signals to keep standing. What doesn't fit? The gadget glitches. If the device were simply malfunctioning, we'd expect random false alarms without a storyline, morning, afternoon, night, no dramaturgy. Irregularity, 3 warnings today, then a week of silence. Technical noise, sync errors, app instability, battery complaints, multiple unrelated oddities. But you've built a different pattern. The notifications behave like a director. They don't just arrive often, they arrive in a way that breaks Valerie's calm at an ordinary moment, escalates conflict with Max right when he's close to believing or exhaling, reinforces Valerie's belief, my only support is in the numbers. A tech glitch rarely behaves like a dramatist, a person can. The key evidence, access. In investigative logic, there's a classic triad, means, motive, opportunity. In psychological reconstruction, it becomes, who had access, who had a reason, and who benefits from the consequences. Access, who brought the ring into the story, and who set it up? Cyril. This isn't anyone. It's the person who held the phone, the account, the app, the permissions, the sync, on the very first evening, when Valerie was vulnerable and grateful. If you want the reader to believe it, that moment has to live in the text, not as he helped, but as a small detail. Cyril taps confidently, knows the menus, doesn't ask, does it fast. Motive, not villain but hunger. Now, why Cyril? He has a psychological wound. People choose him quickly, but don't hold him. He's attractive, liked, but relationships don't become home. That forms not romantic longing, but a hunger for being secured. I want to be not temporary. And beside him there is Max, stable, reliable, predictable. Someone who holds and is held. For Cyril, Max isn't just a friend. He's a point where Cyril stops feeling disposable. In this type of character, love for Max rarely starts with confession. It starts with behavior. Be there when it's hard. Be useful when everyone else gets irritated. Become the person who is easier than the partner in crisis. That's not poetry. It's a survival strategy for someone who's never been kept. The plan, small pushes. A believable Cyril doesn't build a grand plot to split them up. He thinks simpler, and that's what makes it dangerous. They're already doing badly. I'm not creating it. I'm accelerating it. Her anxiety will drown him anyway. He needs air. I can be air. And here the ring becomes the tool. Because the ring lets you influence not people directly, but their reactions. Give Valerie a signal, right pointing arrow. She panics, right pointing arrow demands recognition. Create chaos for Max. Right pointing arrow, he burns out. Right pointing arrow says something cruel. Right pointing arrow withdraws. Against that withdrawal, Cyril becomes the only calm island. This isn't romance, it's relationship engineering. What it produces, why it works. The outcome in your current season isn't they divorced. That would be a future spoiler. It's what we already observe. Valerie stopped trusting her body and started trusting signals. Max stopped trusting Valerie and began protecting himself with invalidation. Cyril took the position of the person people trust not because he's right, but because he doesn't press. So instead of a couple, we get a system: wife, device, husband, third. And in that system, the third person gains power. My finding. Who staged it? Cyril, because three things align: access, motive, benefit. Means/motive/opportunity logic. What motives? To not be temporary, to keep Max close, to become the person without whom you can't cope. What it leads to? Not just conflict, but erosion of trust. Valerie alone with her body, Max alone with guilt, Cyril at the center of their tension. And that's what is truly scary here. Cyril didn't break them from scratch. He found a crack and gently slid in a wedge. Then another, then another.